Okay. Morning all. Thanks so much for coming through to this incredible venue and this beautiful day in Cape Town. My name is Cliff Giesenaar and I'm joined by Pierre van der Hoven. We're the joint CEOs of Silverleaf. We'll talk a bit later. And as I say, thank you very much for attending. We're excited to chat to you here today about a brand new investment vehicle and into a new asset class. Hopefully you've seen the brand and you've heard a little bit about us. We're going to take you on a journey with a presentation as well. And please, if you've got any questions, it's a very interactive session. We wanted to make it small and intimate. So without further ado, I'm going to jump straight into why we're here. And I'm hoping that you have some idea of the fact that cannabis is now legal. It's a new industry and it's out there. And it's gone from prohibition, like the days of alcohol 100 years ago, to being set free. And this plant has so many applications. It's very much on trend. It's a very, very fast-growing industry. Over 30 countries have legalized it already. More are following. Mexico just went fully legal a couple of weeks ago. And we really believe that cannabis's time has come. And we're, as I said, very excited about this fund and about the opportunities that we're looking at. We've wrapped it into a 12J structure to give it a tax incentive. And we've put together a very, very competent, powerful team to bring professionalism to the industry and to help look at these opportunities and to help grow the opportunities. So I'm going to refer to the slides as we go along, but please, if you've got any questions, just ask us and we can make it an interactive discussion. So just by way of quick introduction, in terms of myself and Pierre, as I said, I'm very involved in the industry and immersed in the industry. I've got a store just down the road here at Sea Point called Taste of Cannabis. We have 8 of those stores around the country in shopping malls, Johannesburg, Cape Town, we're opening in Durban, and we're a CBD retailer. CBD is legal, and there's a lot of interest. We're doing a lot of trade. We're at that end of the value chain. We're going to unpack the value chain as we go along. And I also have a herbal smoking blend, which I launched about 2 years ago, and that is in close to 200 stores now as an alternative to tobacco, and it can be mixed with cannabis. I have an MBA from UCT, and I was also involved in starting a cannabis trade association because we found that there were a lot of businesses that were engaging with government individually for a number of reasons, and we wanted to pull those businesses together to form an association that has a voice, and that government, they don't engage with individuals, they won't engage with companies, but as an industry body, they happen to start talking to us and engaging, because this industry needs to be opened up for trade. So we're excited about that association. We're getting a lot of interest and a lot of membership. And in terms of my involvement in the cannabis industry, I've been in the game for about 3 years. I got on a plane just after it was decriminalized. I went to Prague, Barcelona, and London to the different cannabis events over there to try and understand the landscape on the domain and see what was happening and how it applied and how it could apply to South Africa. Very, very exciting. The one thing I noticed was that there was no African story out there. They all know about Durban poison and Malawi and Swazi, but there wasn't a range of African products, and they were all saying, "Where are you guys?" So that is part of the opportunity that we will unpack with you today. And then, I don't know if you want to introduce yourself.
I've been watching the industry for many years, and about 4 years ago, I got contacted to write a position paper for the country in terms of economic opportunity. Since then, I've got deeply immersed in the industry, trying to set up a number of farms, cultivation operations in the Eastern Cape. I got very involved on the cannabis culture, civil society side of cannabis, which is interesting, and quite a journey. I was telling some interesting stories last night. I run a consulting company. We focus on cannabis. We do license applications. I also started an industry association, which is now working together with Cliff's Industry Association. And we have engaged and have been talking to government and a whole lot of private sector players trying to put this industry together. We made input on a number of the master plans, and there's a whole lot of them. Yeah, so that's my background, now deeply immersed in this industry. So also as an entrepreneur, actually. Yeah, and just realized that this industry needs a 12J, it needs a credible professional investment vehicle. So when Cliff came to me and said, hey, let's start a fund, I went, okay, cool, and that's why we are.
And as I said, it's very much on trend. Just to differentiate and split up the industry, there's basically adult use or recreation, there's medical, and there's industrial. And the way we're looking at it is that the industrial, and the way we see it out there, is that the industrial is not the sexy stuff, but it's what we think is the area with the most potential. Adult recreational use is not legal in terms of trade in South Africa yet, and that will change, we believe, over the next year or two. But medical is definitely a growing industry now, and there's been a lot of investment into that, and industrial is already starting to open up. In fact, we're very much of the opinion that it will be declared a crop in the very short term, foreseeable future. If you want to add around
that. There's a lot of questions in the industry about the legality, the law. And the truth is, it's an industry that changes every day. Last week, a big pharma company bought a cannabis company for $7.2 billion. Yesterday, one of our people we know in the industry has bought the first decortication factory in Southern Africa. The law's changing. So just as a summary, we've got adult use, and we've got the Hayes Club in Cape Town, who's now going to court about using the adult use in the constitutional court hearing to say, if I don't have a place to grow cannabis, I can give it to them. They grow it on my behalf, but it's my plant, and they charge you the fee for that service. And that's gone to court now, so that's really interesting. In terms of hemp, in the past few years, there were hemp research permits issued by SAPRA, but that's all been put on hold now, and it's now falling under the Department of Agriculture. It's now called the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development. So we, as Cliff alluded to, we're expecting an announcement within a week, which is going to be hugely significant for the industry, because technically the industry is on hold if it's non-medical. And then in the medical side, we've got the Section 22 license issued by SAPRA, which is expensive, high barriers to entry. As we were discussing at our previous, there's movement there. We don't know for sure, but I think at least 10 licenses were issued over December. So that would probably bring the total to in the region of 30 people who are fully licensed. They are licensed as a medical facility, which is GMP, good manufacturing process. So the industry is starting to get going now. Yeah, there's a lot of confusion in the market. So normally when the questions come in, they're all around how do I get licensed, how do I get into the industry. So we can address that in more detail, but I think we'll come back.
And just to touch on the slide in terms of the applicability of hemp, it's in terms of our country and our people, it can feed us, it can clothe us, it can house us, and it can heal us. It's a plant that is widely applicable and is going to affect a lot of industries. In fact, we were reading this morning that 3M are now looking at how they can use hemp as adhesives and to replace packaging with plastics, with garbage bags, and all sorts of things. So the question is, why is South Africa so well poised for this plant? And I don't know if you know this, but 30% of the world's illicit cannabis comes from the Southern African region. In fact, I think Iceland, obviously, they can't really grow it because of the weather conditions. 90% of their cannabis has come from South Africa. And it's a potential for us to become a production powerhouse, but we don't want to just be limited to farming. We actually have to add value to the crop. You know, we don't want to become another Nigeria where they're extracting the oil that fell out of the ground, or processing it elsewhere and then buying it back. We need to be creating value and adding value here. And ultimately, and it's part of my dream and my mission, is to export products, high quality products out of Africa and tell that African story, so that when I go back to these European expos and American expos, there we are as an African brand and an African story. And we believe it's a perfect region because of our climate, because of our history with the plant, because of our landrace strains, and because of the advanced agricultural export infrastructure that we have. We're a well-respected country when it comes to exporting agricultural products. And in fact, the agricultural industry did superbly well in the last year or two. Even over COVID, I think it's the number one industry.
Just a comment about South Africa. So globally, the industry is going from heading towards $100 billion. They're multi-billion-dollar companies listed on the Canadian Stock Exchange, and I'm not here to talk about the world. I can just tell you it's the fastest growing industry in the world. It's exploding globally. So we're not leading it. It's not all about us. But what the industry knows is just when South Africa comes online with the right model, it will be a cultivation powerhouse. And it's also always got that South Africanness of these guys are innovative. They come up with interesting stuff. And we've got that brand as the Rainbow Nation. We do things differently. So the world is watching South Africa. Legally and legislatively, we've been a bit slow in some areas, as I touched on earlier, but we've got the Constitutional Court. And the other side is we've got a model that's really interesting. We're not doing the Lesotho Zimbabwe model, which is really about earning foreign exchange. We've got full political support. The president came out in the last SONA. The premiers have come out and said cannabis is a fundamental industry. So I think it's a perfect storm. And South Africa is perfectly positioned with a proviso that we have a proper, well-managed, professional industry. And just touching briefly on that, that's exactly why we set up the 12J Fund. The development side of the industry cultivation licenses is happening, but what's not really happening is there's no credible vehicle for investors to access the industry. And we're going to talk a little bit more about 12J, but it's very important that the logic behind 12J is understood. It was set up by the government. It's a tax deduction. It's aimed at SMMEs. It's aimed to lock in funds, and it's aimed to drive employment, job creation. So the fund fits very perfectly with the government's objectives. And it's a beginning of going to the market and attracting proper investors who want to know there's good corporate governance and there's a vehicle to invest in the industry.
And we'll take you through the team and who's involved and why. Just in terms of what Pierre's saying, the innovation that we've seen in the last 2 years in this industry, I've never seen, and I was there at the birth of the internet, the birth of software, cell phones. Pierre was there at the beginning of media, and this thing has just exploded. And the South African level of innovation is fantastic. The products that we've got on our shelves there, if you go and take a look, it really, really is impressive what South Africans can do and how quickly. Okay, so yeah, just as Pierre was saying, the support from the government is there. In terms of the value chain and where we're going to focus as a fund, it's a key question. Primarily on the cultivation. On the cultivation side, because there is a lot of action happening there. Licenses have been issued, plants are in the ground, but not enough. We really are putting the message out there that we need to put plants in the ground and we need to get the cultivation side growing so that the rest of the value chain can unfold. Until we've got plants to process, there's no point having processing machines investing in that area. And then the manufacturing and testing and the quality control, all of that has to come because especially when it comes to the medical export market, unless it's compliant, the world is not interested in buying our product. On the other end of the value chain, obviously that's where I'm operating in terms of brands and retail. There is a lot of trade and there is a lot of activity because CBD is illegal. Just to cover that, in case anyone is not familiar with it, less than 600 milligrams in the pack or in the product, that's a Schedule 0 substance, meaning it's like Disprin or Panado, you can buy it anywhere and sell it anywhere. If it's higher than 600 milligrams, it's a Schedule 4, which means you need a script. And then THC is a Schedule 6, meaning that it is a medicine, it does have medical benefit, but it also requires a script. So a lot of trade and activity, and I'm sure you've seen CBD products, and everybody's got somebody that they can get it from, and they've seen it or tried it. There's a lot of we've even coming in at the airport, approached by somebody who was selling CBD in one of the places we were in.
So in terms of the value chain and the fund focus, so very simply, it is cultivate, process, manufacture, retail, and then on the side of services. So as a fund, we're going to look at all elements of the value chain. We firmly believe that anybody in their vertical, if they're good, the industry growth will propel them to greatness and huge returns. So we're going to look at all elements of it. But it's not quite as simple as that. We can't really go and say we're going to look at the value chain of hemp if we haven't got any plants in the ground. Now, for the first time, we got a decortication factory, so suddenly that part of the value chain opened up. In terms of dispensaries, for example, until there's clear legislation around the Haze Club and dispensaries, we don't really know. So while we're looking at all elements of the value chain, it's very much dictated as the industry unfolds. And in terms of investments, we've already got a lot of investments that have approached us. And then there's some interesting ones, and I see Trenton's here. He's got a media company. Media training and education, for example, sits under the services vertical, and it's critical. We have to educate everybody. There's so many misconceptions. So when we talk about the identification of qualifying companies, that's the context in terms of the value chain.
Right. In terms of our investment strategy, we've gone with a conservative IRR of 20%, around 20%, but it's a brand new fund, so we don't know exactly what it's going to look like. There are companies that we're looking at that could potentially shoot the lights up, real blue sky stuff that are showing us fantastic numbers, and we've seen that that is achievable in other areas and in other countries, but we want to take a very conservative approach. So we're managing risk. We're very much backing the jockey. Everybody says that in a kind of VC venture capital area, but it's critical for us to invest in the right management team that can execute, because especially over the last 2 years, it's an industry of activists, pioneers, cowboys, a couple of stoners and growers that are super passionate about the plant, but we don't know if they necessarily have the right ability to build a business. And that does lead me into a discussion we'll cover in the next slide around how we're going to approach those investments that we make in terms of incubating and hand-holding and helping to grow those businesses. Because we've seen that with other 12Js that we've interacted with, and why they're successful is because they've helped those businesses along the way and along the path, adding value, connecting, opening doors, and so on. So we'll discuss also how we believe our team is well poised to add that value in the next couple of slides. But that's really the focus. And then with Pierre and I, both having deep industry network, both locally and globally, and our associations, we believe we've got access to a lot of good opportunities in the pipeline and very good deal flow that will come through.
Yeah, so if you look at the financial and the risk landscape, I've dealt extensively with the big law firms and banks. They're reluctant to come into this industry. So there's been a lot of investment. I think about 3 billion rands already been invested in cannabis in South Africa. But it's family money, it's angel investors, it's not institutional investors. So one of the big strategic objectives is actually to put our hand up and say, yeah, as a properly registered, administered by GrowVest, who run 20 funds, we're essentially a venture capital company, and what that means is there's huge, our prospectus is, 80 pages. It's done properly, the vehicle is trusted as a structure. The banks are a little bit reluctant at this point, but they're watching us. They are saying, look, if you guys can pull this off, the money's going to come. On the other side, we just had the Biden election, which is hugely significant in the global industry because it's still illegal at a federal level. When that changes, and there are many other developments through the World Health Organization, I won't go into all of them, but we are poised globally for incoming investment. And what we feel is when that happens, they're going to come into this country and they're going to look for the best company in their vertical. They don't want to buy startups. It's Africa. They're inherently skeptical about it. They're going to come in here and they're going to find, okay, here's a company that's got good management, it's professionally run, corporate governance, checks and balances are in place, and a dollar-based check for a rand-based company. I think they're going to snap up the investments. So while our investment horizon is 5 years for the investor, that's dictated by the Government Tax Act, it's possible we could start realizing exits within 3 years. But obviously our fund is a long-term fund. It's really about building a credible vehicle for investors to enter this exciting industry.
And in terms of exits, there really are a couple of options. Obviously, in trade, M&A, selling to other companies within the industry. There's management buyouts as an option, and there's also possibly an alt X listing in time as we create value in these underlying companies. Yes, I think Pierre touched on this a little around the 12J and why now. We've covered some of that. Just the actual quantums of it. So the minimum investment is 50,000 Rand. We've kept the barrier low because we believe that this is such an exciting industry. So many people have it on their radar and want to find that entry point and get involved. And we are talking to some companies about fractional investment. So in other words, chop that up even further, and then they roll it up so we can go as wide as possible. You can bring it maybe down to 1,000 Rand or 5,000 Rand for an investment into the fund. And then, as Pierre said, many companies that we're aware of that need additional runway, that are looking for investments, that are looking for growth and scale. In terms of the team, we've pulled together what we believe is a cracker team, a team with track record. Pierre and I have deep network, as I said, and I think a solid understanding of the domain and the landscape. And we brought in Daryl, who comes out of 30 years of corporate landscape, corporate experience. He worked for Nampak Tissue as the MD.
I look a bit older than I really am.
And we've got some seasoned business people who have the scars and the track record and the experience and the lessons learned. And we're hoping to bring their knowledge and expertise to bear with those companies. Mr. Paul Bacher, who's a very close friend of mine, he started something called the National Mentorship Movement, and he's exited a few companies in the telecom space. The National Mentorship Movement matches mentors and mentees, and he's also been involved in the 12J process over the last few years. In fact, Rob knows him and has worked with him. And Paul understands how to help small businesses and how to mentor and how to grow them. So we really are looking to leverage some of his fantastic expertise. And then Jeff obviously brings the corporate governance and the 12J knowledge and expertise and the fiduciary covering with GrowVest. And then Sibusiso is also on our investment committee. So we have a separate investment committee, and Pierre can maybe give you a little bit more of his background. And then we have Jody Afrika on our investment committee, who's one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the cannabis space in this region. He actually will be coming here just now if everybody wants to meet him. He was the MD of Canopy Growth, which is the world's biggest cannabis company, Canopy Growth Africa. He was running that. That recently done a management buyout and bought it back from them because they're focusing on the US and Canadian markets. And he's now invested in a whole new area in psychedelics into the Sutu, but he's got extensive experience in the cannabis space across the region. Anything else?
Sibs brings a whole lot of value. He traveled around the world for three years. He's a CFA. He's got vast corporate experience. He's got a consulting company, ACIA, and we've got one of his partners in the audience here with us. They connected to a company called Global Go, which is headed up by a guy by the name of Paul Rosen, who I've interacted with. He listed one of the first Canadian companies. It's worth in excess, I think, of 10 billion Canadian dollars now. Paul Rosen's tied up with a legend in the industry called Steve D'Angelo, who launched the first dispensary in California. So there's a global network, there's a local network, and then critically, there's this corporate governance team that Daryl and Paul and Jeff from GrowVest bring. By the very nature of the industry, it's a new industry. So, there's almost all our potential qualifying companies are going to be greenfields, brownfields, maybe 2 years of profits if we're lucky. So it was critical that we put together a team that could actually evaluate the business, the horse. We know the riders, and then we've got this incubation structure to say you're an attractive target, but quite frankly, you're not investment ready. And what we can't do is take our investors' money and give it to a company that's not investment ready. So we've deliberately structured it within 12J, which is an accepted structure, but with people who are experienced with corporate governance. We'll bring in the lawyers, we'll bring in the suits, we'll bring in the accountants, we'll bring in the monthly reporting, we'll incubate these companies if need be to a point where they're investment ready, and only then will we part with our investors' money, because we have a serious obligation, and we fully understand this and accept it, to deliver superior returns to our investors. But just by the nature of the industry, it's new, which has got risk, it's startup. but it's going through explosive growth. So it's got huge upside potential. And I think that's what makes this particular Silverleaf fund stand out as something really exciting to get involved in.
In fact, I almost joked, so when internet came along, this is going to be big, this internet thing. We see the same thing now. This cannabis thing is going to be big, and the applicability of it. You know, it's very early days, but huge, huge potential. And that's really it. We've got a few catchphrases that we throw out there. One is make hemp while the African sun shines. Let's grow Africa, and green is the new gold. So if you've got any questions, we're going to keep it informal, and we're here to chat.
Can I jump in on one last thing around the fund? Sorry, Trent's going to come with a question. Just a very practical thing. So you're interested, go to our website, download the prospectus. It's available on our website. And by the way, it's all FICA approved stamped. That was a tremendous job behind the scenes to get that done. It's available on the website. There's a mandate form. Download the form, fill in the mandate form. And then we go through a FICA process with GrowVest that can administer, and you must put the money in before the end of the tax year. So that's the process. It's all available on the website, www.silverleafinvestments.co.za, and there's a button that says invest. You click on that, it just takes you through the process. Quite simple, nothing complicated, but there is a deadline. And the deadline is the end of the 28th, the end of February. So yeah, if there are any questions practically around that, you're welcome to email us on invest@silverleaf.co.za, and we will respond personally. If you're sitting on the fence and you want a little bit more of a conversation, no problem. Daryl's at the end of that email. He'd be the first point of contact, and we're happy to meet Zoom physically if it's possible, although within COVID restrictions. So anybody who's got sort of detailed questions before they write the check, you're welcome to get hold of it.
And it really is a case of getting in on the ground now. So we said industry, the sunrise industry with huge potential. We believe it's the perfect time.
What's the size of this market globally?
So right now it's about $30 billion and growing at about 20%, as we had on the slide. A lot of the reports that we look at are saying that by 2030 it will be a $100 billion industry.
I think it would be useful to get some perspective on there's two barriers to entry. Obviously, legislation and the government, which we know is moving, it's slow, it's moving. But maybe just to give some perspective on the other barrier, which is public perception. You know, we live and breathe in the cannabis space, and cannabis is second nature. We are a very, very small minority. Often I keep being reminded of that conversation with people outside the space. I get the same questions about etc. So maybe some insights onto how we change public perception, because we don't have a local buying market. We can't depend on the international buying market. How do we stimulate the local market, and how do we educate the local market that cannabis is not bad?
So I can answer that from a brand and a product perspective. You're seeing it out there more and more. If you walk into Discam, you walk into Clicks, you're starting to see it in cosmetic products, and the leaf is slowly getting out there. It's a symbol. I think the social stigma is starting to change as well. At our stores, we're getting a lot of curiosity, a lot of people that are open to trying it, that have heard about somebody who's getting fantastic health benefits from it. So I think there's curiosity, but there's a huge educational component that needs to happen. And we're doing that at our stores as touch points. But so like through Trenton's business, getting the message out there and educating the medical fraternity is one thing, but the general populace is another. So we do need more and more press coverage and more products that are coming up. Will help with that process as well.
Yeah, I also think there's a lot of learnings. I always, whenever you look at a new industry, it seems like South Africa will take at least 5 years more to catch up. And this is a youthful industry. Other than, I suppose, California, which has been going for some time now with medical application, and China for that matter, who have an enormous hemp industry because they never banned the product. The product has little or no efficacy when it comes to adult recreation. and have been using it healthily for textile manufacture and a range of industrial uses for decades. They didn't go through historically what transpired evidently in Europe and North America, where major global manufacturers, or at the time major national manufacturers such as Pont, as an example, who were entering into the world of packaging and textile replacement, the cotton industry, the pharmaceutical industry, all simultaneously attacked the cannabis industry, which in fact was a thriving industry that presidents of the United States used to, had investments in paper manufacturing, in a range of manufacturing, and it was used medicinally in the 18th century across the world. In the 20s, there was a very concerted effort to create a stigma around marijuana. In fact, the word was invented in the 20s. The word marijuana was invented in the 20s. And when you look at the cannabis industry and how wide the application is, it's somewhat ridiculous that this focus has been just on those plants that have high THC content, which is the stuff that makes people high. And frankly, the recreational cannabis industry adult recreational cannabis industry has a strong argument to make that it is not habit forming. B, it is in fact, it's a whole lot better than alcohol consumption. And that C, if you're using it as a smoking or vaping product, contains none of the harmful ingredients that tobacco does. So we live in a bizarre world that has created, I suppose it's an analogy I could make is that the way Trump treated the Democrats as socialists is the way cannabis has been picked on as, the devil's medicine. And sadly, that's going to take years.
But having said that, the alcohol and tobacco industries both absolutely have this on their radar, and Constellation Brands, a huge alcohol company that owns Corona, bought Canopy Growth. I don't know how long ago that was.
And Distill, a couple of weeks back, spent $200 million on an operation over here. So one can clearly see that the people who are recognizing that restricting cannabis and its many uses is probably going to be something that in a decade's time across the globe is going to reverse. The legal industry right now is worth 30 billion. You say, I've read somewhere that the so-called illegal market is worth over 100 billion. And when one looks at tobacco, that's something in the order of a 700 billion category that is slowly dying. Alcohol is probably closer to $1 trillion, but a lot of alcohol companies are certainly taking an interest in using some of the CBD, which whilst doesn't have the effect of making you high, has many beneficial effects, such as relaxing you, being healthy with your own cannabinoid system, are starting to integrate the product into their own. So I think there's so much scope over here, which is why Cliff talks about that this could be an industry that spans many categories. For example, biofuel is a fantastic byproduct. Paper manufacture is so much more efficient using hemp than it is using timber. Packaging there are applications that can replace plastics. So you're seeing a reversal of companies like DuPont and 3A suddenly realizing we have enormous capability to create chemicals for packaging. We can, in fact, be at the forefront of using plant to create packaging.
A plant that grows in 5 months, 1 acre of hemp is equivalent to 3 acres of forest for paper manufacturing.
So just to talk specifically about the public perceptions. So globally, it's a really interesting thing. 67% of Americans support legalization. In Canada, it's legal. So it's a strange situation that is probably for the people with access to information, let's say the internet. Cannabis is a global movement that is completely unstoppable. However, the stigma and the brainwashing we've been through is that a lot of people are just completely brainwashed that this thing is just horrible, and we've been taught that, but it's changing fast. And interestingly enough, one of the biggest, fastest growing segments of the market in America, for example, is the agent. So people have kind of identified the use, but they're using stuff generated and manufactured around the corner. So one of the things is the professionalization of the industry and bring quality and quality management. But coupled with that, there has to be a tremendous training to build the industry. So we've got to go right down to the grassroots level. We've got to take farm laborers and we've got to educate them on how to cultivate this crop. And then right up to the perceptions. A lot of what Daryl's just said, people don't know. They need to be educated. So media, communication, branding is critical. The government has identified this, and the industry is doing a lot about it. But it's certainly a huge area, and one of our target investments will probably be in the media training education space.
Just picking up on that, in terms of the manufacturing of products for different delivery mechanisms, because we're very clear that vaping, smoking, edibles, it's all topicals, it's just delivery mechanisms to get cannabis in the body and on the body and into the receptors. And edibles is one of the fastest growing categories. It was recently legalized in Canada, and certainly for the aged who are not going to take up smoking, it's a great delivery mechanism. So we are looking at manufacturing companies that obviously they have to get compliant, good manufacturing practices, GMP that Pierre's talking about. But if we can add value, as we said right up front, to the product here in South Africa and then take those delivery mechanisms to market, we do see that as a key part of the value chain. We're just not quite ready yet because we need to shorten the value chain. We need to have the stuff produced locally. I mean, it irritates the hell out of me that we are selling imported CBD products in our chocolates and gummy. Why are we not manufacturing it here? 40% higher yield under the African sun, but we're importing CBD. So I think that value chain will shorten, and it will shorten quite quickly. We think that this is the year, and that's again why we get so excited that the fund is now a structure and an investable opportunity.
I think also it's important to contextualize, especially from an investor confidence perspective, that we all know that the trials and tribulations of South African policy of government. But the interesting thing is, even with the states, I think the first expansion in the states in 2001, like 18, 19, 20 years on, they still have ups and downs in legislation, but it has not held the industry back. So the reality is it doesn't matter what happens with legislation. This industry is going to go forward, nothing can stop it. It's the first drug in the history of mankind that's been, I said, been led by the general populace. Normally it's pharmaceutical companies coming from, here's what you need to take. But cannabis has been led by people. And the groundswell is so massive internationally that it's only a question of time what happens here. You look at global trends, you look at the market here, the market is trying for this thing to blow up. On many levels, recreationally, medicinally, product-wise, they just built the first aeroplane in the States, everything like that, small force plane. It's strong in steel. When you get into the cannabis industry, you realize that the travesty is this is being denied. So from an investor perspective, I think it's important to contextualize that everywhere around the world, even though they have a massive industry, there's challenges. So it's not something unique to South Africa, not something we should be afraid of.
But what is unique to South Africa, which is an interesting little tidbit in fact, is that South Africa is one of the primary reasons that cannabis was actually criminalized in the early 20s. It put forward to what was to become the United Nations that this Indian hemp, as they call it, is making the workers lazy, and please just criminalize it. That's the first thing. And then South Africa is one of the only countries that I know of where the constitution was used to decriminalize it 100 years later.
So here we are at the time where this industry that was a world-dominating industry has been locked up, is now being opened up. So the message to investors is that this is the right time to get in. We've seen what's happened in the Canadian Stock Exchange. We've seen what's happening at a state level in America. We see what's starting to happen in Europe, in fact, across the world. And this industry is going to go through a tremendously fast growth curve from here onwards. The question is, are we and is our country going to be riding that wave? And the whole reason we set up this fund is exactly to ride that wave. And the reason we set up this fund is for investors to have a vehicle to enter this industry, because we do understand that there's stigmas out there, there are myths out there, there are fears out there, there are perceptions out there. And that's by design. That's how it was done deliberately during Prohibition to tell us lies, and we bought into it. So now we're going to undo that. But if you do your research as an investor, you will see this is a booming industry. And we hope that you choose Silverleaf as the method to get into it, because we've earned our stripes. We've done our 10,000 hours. We've put together a good team. And we're at the bottom of this tremendously steep growth curve that's about to happen now.
Pierre, why is, sorry, go ahead.
I have questions around the fund.
Yeah.
So the fund floats in a fit.
Yeah.
What's the target side? You don't need that side.
Yeah, so we.
What are the fees?
Okay. So thanks for that. So that's detail around the fund. So our prospectus is we're going with 50,000 rand share, 1,000 shares. We're trying to raise 50 million rand. We're only allowed to invest 20% in any one project or qualifying company. So the more money we get, the more opportunities we've got to invest. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg. If we get a little bit amount of money, I don't know how big an impact we'll make. And then in terms of the act, you're locked in for 5 years. There's a second investment opportunity in August for provisional taxpayers. But basically now is the closing at the end of February for the tax year. Our fees are a 3% raising fee and a 2.5% on management fee. And then there's some upside on where we take risk, where we incubate. There'll be an incentive for the management time. So pretty much within the 12J funds, of which there are up to 160, 50 of them are operating properly. We've adopted a very similar fee structure. And if you want to get into the real detail of exactly how that works, it's all in the prospectus and it's all available on the website. I don't know if that answers your question.
My understanding of 12J is if you can invest in 12J, it's going to be the tax rate. I think yes. So it's not just open to donors.
That is true, but it's such a selling point that you're able to basically make an investment. For every 100 rand you invest, you're going to get 45 rand back from the tax man. So you're making 100 rand worth at 55 rand real investment.
Sure. But having
so
said
that's
that,
the attractive.
The focus, obviously, now over the next 2 weeks is the 12J.
Yeah, but
thereafter, it will be co-investment from other funds. And, we hope to shoot way past the 50 million rand, because then it gives us a lot more resource to actually make a tangible investment and real dividends.
So phase 2 would be to either partner with venture capital companies, so they can use our expertise, we can co-invest. So if there are venture capital companies out there wanting to get into the industry, come talk to us. Or we go through another round, and next year another round. There's the sunset clause where 12J may be ended in June 2021. We're waiting for feedback from the government. But your question is absolutely valid. If you don't believe in the cannabis industry, do not invest in our fund. This is not about tax. This is about investing in a proper business that can give you proper returns. You can enhance your returns by getting a tax break. So we're looking for people who believe in cannabis, who believe in the industry, who believe in the management team, and are happy to put their money away for 5 years. It really, at the end of the day, goes down to the underlying investments. You get a tax break on a bad investment, it doesn't make sense.
Just be clear that
the opportunity for the taxpayer is for the end of February.
Yeah.
And then there's provision in August. Yeah. Your fund's not actually going to close.
No, not at all.
So that's why I think there's
Okay, our first round to qualify for the tax deduction for the 2020-21 tax year means you've got to put the money in the account. We give you a tax certificate. When you submit your tax return, you get a deduction or a refund. Okay, but our fund is under no means a short-term or even a 5-year fund. We've got a long-term plan here. We're going to raise money in August. We're going to raise money next February. We're going to keep growing the fund. We're going to partner with venture capital companies, and we hope to eventually get real big numbers. You know, I'm talking in excess 500 million fund. This is a big industry. It's going to need a lot of money. So yes, this is just step one.
Yeah. And then obviously, I think the documentation
That's a real compliment, because what you don't know is the person talking is highly experienced in this field and has a fund of his own. So thank you.
And you don't want to fall between two stools with regards to capital raising. Yeah. And the perception of the industry is not only that in the perception of the cannabis industry, there's also a bit of a perception of the agriculture.
Right.
And so just to get also been scars in the back of that, is there other individuals, and there's a bit of herd mentality in these projects. That, I mean, have you got some real key individuals? They invest, people tend to follow. I mean, for example, Buffett had some investors that would help. And then that's from an individual point of view, and then from an institutional point of view. I mean, just to illustrate the point, a simple example, the Discovery as an institution came on board. That would obviously add a lot of topspin to have you got those sort of guys? Because you know, the worst thing I think is the fall between two stools.
Yeah. So I'm going to try and answer that without disclosing confidentialities. The answer is we've got verbal interactions with a lot of people, high net worth individuals, people from family offices, people in institutions, wealth managers who have come to us and they use the word, this is a sexy asset class. So they're considering it.
We'll only know the 28th, I think, from that perspective, because we've used the 28 Feb 12J as the herding mechanism for this round, and it remains to be seen. But there definitely is strong interest, and there definitely are a number of test cases where some very big names in the investment world have invested in this category. So I guess it remains to be seen, Rob, if we're going to get some of the sign-ups, but it appears that people contemplate until the 28th when it comes to 12Js. We might know more than.
I think you're right. I think that, and it's not just the individual. I mean, I think I've got a company that wants to invest in projects, but they say taxpayers is different from the
Yes.
There's somebody here sitting on a trust, in a trust who wants to invest in a fund or a company. They mustn't think that the only opportunity to invest is only to
Yes.
So it's a very exciting thing.
Appreciate that, and I think that we get onto that horse post 28th, but we're doing all we can to reach those trusts and individuals.
And the last question is that they're obviously in the value chain a whole lot of cyber. Would you consider introducing a different class of share for a particular cyber that may require more capital? So if I am the biggest farmer in the country, and I think that the great opportunity we start acquiring farms, but I would rather invest directly into that to qualifying company. So has only one class share?
I think absolutely. We're looking at all those options. It's early days. Okay, so we haven't put any of that in place. But we are engaging with people, international funds who are going, cannabis South Africa, we could have a look at that. Venture capital companies are going, we don't know that industry, but we're going to have a look. We're talking to impact funds that may co-invest with us. But in terms of changing the class of shares and some of the financial engineering, we'll get to that. But yeah, we've just got to, it's baby steps. We are not as experienced as you are. We're launching our fund and we've got a long way to go.
And you only invest more than 20%.
Yeah.
Or 50 million, and some of those assets you're going to want to buy would probably be significantly more
than the entire.
So if you've got a 100 million,
exactly.
You'd be fully to leave a lot of opportunity on the table.
So we did have a discussion yesterday, just to answer your earlier question, with somebody who said that they are looking to co-invest with us, and we can for exactly that reason.
In fact, we have an agri fund that was probably one of the first to approach us. And they're predominantly in livestock, and they've said this seems to be, this would fit our next phase. So they've asked us to speak with them in the last week of Feb, because they'd definitely like to take advantage, even if it's a lot smaller, take advantage of the tax attachment.
And if you look at one of our partners, it was absolutely critical for us that we covered all the bases which I touched on earlier. I mean, one of them is Grovest. Grovest is highly experienced. They manage multiple funds. They've looked at models that work. They've experienced ones that don't work. So that was one of the critical things, to take the industry expertise and combine it with the financial engineering expertise, legal expertise on the one side, and then the good corporate governance and the incubation. So that's the package we try to put together. And I must say, we've been doing this now for 2 weeks in terms of launching from nothing. The team created this in an unbelievably short space of time, and the response we've got from the market is nothing short of staggering. There's a tremendous amount of interest from all kinds of different people, including the money side, but the investment side of it. So I think we're at the beginning again of this explosive growth in the industry. The timing is right, the team's right, and we've got very high hopes that not only are we going to get superior returns for our investors, hopefully we can become a little bit of a spark into the industry, that some of the big guys going, okay, now I'm going to look at it. Because the missing elements of corporate governance, financial engineering, skills in investing weren't present in the South African industry. They exist in Canada, but not here. So that's really about, that's what we're trying to say, and the response has been great. I think cannabis and hemp is, whichever way you look at it, is a highly politicized industry on a global basis. So of course it is, and we need to make sure that we have the support of government. Now, government's policies, I was saying this in the previous thing, are generally good, but the implementation is shocking. So we've got some issues with government in terms of legislation and the speed and the change and the expertise, but it doesn't matter. We operate in a commercial, business operates in South Africa in a particular political environment. And I think we are all united as business and government that we need to address the issues in the country, like poverty alleviation, job creation. We've just been smacked by COVID. By the way, COVID has been fantastic for cannabis. That's another twist in the tail. But yes, BEE and transformation is critical in the industry, and we're not immune to that. However, we have a very clear obligation to our shareholders to provide returns. So we're engaging with government. And we're going to talk to government, and we're going to hopefully set up training companies and education and work with a sensitivity to the environment. So yeah, we can't ignore it. And I think one fantastic thing about cannabis is you can build an industry from the bottom. It can be built in rural areas, which is going local. It's a global trend. So yeah, it's important.
Sorry, you had a question?
Yeah, I just would like to know a bit more about the pipeline.
Okay.
I mean, you talk about business structure, but where is the money actually going to be allocated?
Okay. So the first problem we've got, we don't know how much money until we get past the end of February. Okay. So that will dictate the unit investment we can put into each project. So cultivation, for example, if you want to choose a number, you want to do a medical cultivation, you're in for 20 million plus. For us to put 20 million in cultivation operation, we need to raise 100. The chance of that's not going to happen. Okay, but could we put in a smaller number and co-invest with venture capital partners? Definitely. So cultivation is get plants in the ground. That's where a lot of activity is happening right now.
We've already identified two.
Yeah, I want to know what opportunities, not
Okay.
the
Yeah. So there are multiple opportunities.
We've got two cultivation operations in particular that Pierre and I both know that we've looked at that are ripe for. They've got off-take agreements. They have got plants in the ground. They've got product. Guys that have lost their first harvest, paid their school fees in operation. Then, as I said, at the manufacturing side, 2 days ago I was at a factory up in Johannesburg in the process of getting GMP and going to see an extraction lab this afternoon here in Cape. So there are quite a few companies in the pipeline, I'd say 8 to 10, that we are about to go into a due diligence process with that we've, I'm going to say cherry picked, but we've identified over the last 6 months to a year that are ripe for investment.
Could I add that I'm managing, let's call it the desk of inquiries, and I'm getting more inquiries for funding than I am for investment. There's no shortage of opportunities that are going to present themselves to us without us publicly having to advertise. There are many players in the market, all trying, many small-scale players, and we've got to pick a best of breed amongst them. So the concern about pipeline isn't, well, it's not one of our biggest, it's not our big concern. Our big concern is raising capital. Thereafter, it's going into the due diligence process and picking.
And we're going to be very, very selective because it's easy to get in, it's difficult to get out, and we really want to choose the best of breed that we can find. And between Pierre and I and other members of our team, very connected.
We're also very keen on focusing on those players that have product that would be, or businesses that would be right for export markets, because we think that's probably going to be the most investment-friendly type of businesses to acquire.
Incubate here, rand-based costs, dollar-based revenues.
And those players that are doing well have got off-take agreements, and I'm not sure how much you know about the industry, you might know a lot. The CBD side, the medicinal cannabis side, the non-adult recreation side whatsoever, is where the greatest interest and demand is coming from our perspective. That's, those are the ones that we've identified, two growers that we're looking at, that simultaneously approached us.
Both with licenses, and even last week I had an inquiry from Hong Kong looking for distribution of African products that they can take there. So there's a lot of activity. Great, guys. Thank you.
You guys mentioned on your webinar recently or the other day that you guys are foreseeing that they're going to legalize hemp relatively soon, like now, and then sort of wait for the rest of the sort of market to open up. Why would they choose sort of legalizing it now and not sort of go the whole way and produce everything at one point?
Let me answer that. So the first thing to be legalized in South Africa was medicinal. So it went to the MCC, which became SAPRA. They issued legislation, Section 22, they applied. So that's sorted out. In fact, been underway for a number of years, but is only now starting to happen. Then there was a lot of talk around hemp and job creation and the involvement of small farms. Okay. And on the other side, there is the existing illicit market where we supply 30% of the world's out of the Transkei. And so the challenge for the government was to how do we address this? The Constitutional Court then came out of the blocks, declared the private use bill, and in a way is starting to unlock the adult use market. But the government said at that point, we're not talking about adult use. And quite frankly, one of the biggest problems in our industry is the narrative has only been about the adult use, when the real discussion should be about hemp and medicinal and job creation and economic development, not about smoking a joint. So unfortunately, the narrative, again, getting back to Trenton's question, we need to change the narrative, and we need to talk to people about what are the benefits for our people in the country. Okay, so the one area that was grey was hemp. Now, hemp is defined as less than 1% THC. So it's not a particular strain. It's a chemical definition made up by man. Okay, but then the debate went with the government is about the end use. Okay, so they said if the end use is medicinal, it goes through SAHPRA. If the end use is a carpet, why does it go through a health authority? So then, and by the way, that logic was good, but it's also fundamentally flawed, because when you farm, you should dual crop. You should use your stalks for fiber, and you should use the flowers or the seeds for medicine or food or wellness. But the government picked up on that. SAHPRA declared in May last year, we're no longer going to accept any applications for hemp. Agriculture then stood up and said, we'll do it. And we've been waiting in suspense now for 8 months. So that's what we're waiting for. Now, we know under very good authority that agriculture is going to amend the legislation. They're going to declare hemp as an agricultural crop. There's still grey areas, because where does hemp for CBD fall in? Where does hemp to smoke fall in? So there's still work to be done, but under good authority by mid-February, they will announce the changes to Schedule 4 and 5 of the Act, and we are waiting with bated breath, because it is to me, where we are now, that's going to be the spark that's just going to ignite this industry, because suddenly farmers are going to go, hang on, I don't have to build a 20 million rand head house and do a GMP facility. I can start farming a product and I can go. But there's an inherent problem there, is what's the next step? How do you process the hemp? So it's great to get the plants in the ground, and we really, plants in the ground, but there's got to be revenue. So this investment by Dasha Corp into the decortication factory this week, yesterday, is a significant investment. And now we're at that strain, it's a chicken and the egg. You plant the product when you don't have the processing facility, or do you build the processing facility when you haven't got access to the product? When this announcement's made, the spark will go. And the other half of my life is consulting, and we're exactly doing that. We're saying to people, line up, we've got over 50 potential license application people we're working with. The moment they get a new regime that's cheaper, lower barrier to entry, they'll start. It's all kind of wait, and hopefully it will happen in the next week.
Great. Thank you. Please join us for some snacks.
And please feel free to ask as many questions as you want.
Great, thanks for coming.